There is a sound. It drifts through the dark, faint, rhythmic, a lone basketball tapping against hardwood, echoing through an empty gymnasium where the lights hum softly overhead. You can almost hear the breath of the court itself, the dust, the hush. Sometimes greatness isn't born in the roar of a crowd, but in silence, when no one is watching. There is a figure beneath the net, a boy, a young man maybe, not yet the legend we'll come to know, not yet forged in fire or triumph, just practicing. The gym is cold, breath curling in the winter air like morning fog. He exhales, eyes on the rim, again and again. The ball rises, arcs, falls through. It's a simple thing, this version of him. No highlight reel, no acclaim, no shoes with his name stitched into them by steady foreign hands. No statues, no documentaries, no, I'm back. Just a boy lighting his own fire in the quiet. Michael Jeffrey Jordan was not born into brilliance. No chorus sang for him on hospital steps in Brooklyn one February morning in 1963. No prophets wrote his name in the clouds. But somehow he would carry something, the flicker of an intent too big for most men, the kind of belief that turns the ordinary into the not quite real. Even as a child, there was motion in him, a restless drive. He never stayed still, never stopped moving, not toward noise, but toward something he couldn't yet name. He would fail first. That's the part the world forgets. Years before, the rings and banners, there was gravel scratching under Converse shoes, chain nets that clanged under broken layups, faded backboards nailed to weather-blistered poles in a North Carolina backyard, and a boy trying to jump higher, always higher. When we say Michael Jordan now, what do we mean? Is it just a name, swollen by memory, or the mythology that clings to it like fog? He's more silhouette than man now. He floats in slow motion, in commercials. He stares out from murals and magazine covers tucked away in dusty boxes. Air Jordan, in flight, immortal, untouchable. But he wasn't born that way. No, he had to build his own wings, string by string, stitch by stitch. He had to miss the shot, miss it again, lose, stumble, get cut from a team, not make the varsity squad as a kid, stand outside gyms he wasn't yet allowed to enter, cry in the dark. That's how it happened. He poured himself into the game like ink on canvas, not to be seen, but to become. And so it was. Him alone, inside an empty gym, everything echoing, the distant squeak of soles, the fluttering rhythm of net strings, the soft whisper of the ball spinning off careful fingers. These were the sounds that raised him. There's a kind of haunting quiet in greatness. We see the shine, the stage lights, but we rarely hear the silences, the solitary morning hours, the missed family dinners, the repetition, the aching loneliness of wanting it more than anyone around you. Michael knew that silence. He danced with it, battled it, made it into music. Long before reporters and rivalries and championship rings, he was shadowboxing with himself beneath a flickering gym light, improvising his own legend. People think it started with a slam dunk. No, it started with one foot in front of the other, one more shot, one day after the last, even when no one clapped. Especially then, he became obsessed, not with being better than others, but with being better than himself, with rising, always, with building a version of himself that no longer remembered what falling was. And every night, with no one watching, he kept forgetting gravity, because despite what we've been told, this story isn't about flight. It's about the silence before the leap. What we're about to walk through isn't a highlight reel. it isn't a scream or a chant from the rafters. It's something more fragile, more human. We'll see victories, yes, impossible shots, moments that hover in the dreamscape of basketball forever. But we'll follow them quietly, taste the cost embedded in them, because every legend leaves behind echoes, and if you listen carefully, you might hear them in the hush of a midnight gym, in the breath before a free throw, in the soft resolve of a man walking toward perfection again, knowing he'll never quite touch it, and doing it anyway. This isn't the roar of the stadium. This is the whisper it left behind. There's something about the slower mornings in the American South. The sun takes its time rising, like it knows the day can wait. Dew clings to grass that will soon be torn by sneakers and footsteps. And in Wilmington, North Carolina, in a modest home tucked along a quiet street, a boy named Michael Jordan started to wake up earlier than most. Before the world assigned greatness to his name, he was just Mike. He'd slip out of bed into the cotton warmth of summer, the creak of wood floors beneath calloused feet, moving with quiet purpose as the house murmured behind him. His father rustling in the garage, his mother preparing breakfast, his brothers already awake, eager to test each other again. The Jordan household was filled with rhythm. It wasn't always peace, but it was always motion. James Jordan was a mechanic, stoic and proud, endlessly tinkering with old machines. Dolores, Michael's mother, was steady and firm, the one who kept the wheels from falling off the tracks. There was Larry, the older brother, fierce and fast, the benchmark. James Jr., known as Ronnie, and sisters Dolores and Roslyn. In a house filled with 5 children, competition wasn't a sport. It was a necessity. Back then, the hoop they played on was hammered to a tree or nailed into a plank of wood. The court was gravel, not paint. There were no lines, no referees, just scraped knees and banged elbows. If you lost, you waited, no questions asked. And Michael, he lost often. At first, Larry had his number. Taller, more confident. He blocked Michael's shots, outpaced him, outtalked him. But something stirred in Michael each time he fell short. He wanted it. Not just to win, but to figure out why he didn't. Evenings would melt into dusk, with the sound of basketballs hitting backboards that weren't square, the netless rim rattling in protest. Fireflies blinked across the lawn while Michael stayed out, working on dribbling, on shooting, on jumping, always trying to jump higher. It became a kind of ritual. Michael versus the rim, Michael versus the sky. Every miss was cataloged, every mistake a study. He didn't just want to play, he wanted command. He was small then, skinny, raw. His bedroom walls weren't adorned with trophies or medals. Not yet. Just chalk scribbles, daydreams, a mind looping visions of what could be. In spring and summer, he'd chase his brother to the court again, try again, fall again, get up. There's a story often told, passed almost like gospel now, that Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. And like most legends, it's not entirely true, but not entirely false either. In 10th grade, Michael tried out for the varsity team at Laney High. He was good, really good, but he was raw, skinny, undeveloped. The coaches chose another sophomore that year, taller, a bit more polished for the time, and Michael ended up on the junior varsity squad. For many, that would have been enough. Rejection, after all, has a bite. But Michael, he took it personally, not in bitterness, but as fuel. He played that JV season, like something inside him had snapped into place. He lit up the scoreboard. He exploded on the court. He turned embarrassment into ignition. He began waking earlier, training harder, fewer excuses, more hours, alone in the gym, alone in his head. Every dribble marked a refusal to be overlooked again. His mother remembers finding him crying that night when he didn't make varsity, but she also remembers what he told her, that he would never let it happen again. Pain, for him, was always temporary. What lasted was how he responded to it. He was becoming, but not yet arrived. In school, he wasn't the loudest. He wasn't a troublemaker. In fact, he was sensitive, a bit shy, but disciplined, determined. There's a certain kind of fire that flickers differently, one that doesn't burn chaotic, but instead with quiet consistency. That was Michael. The ones around him began to notice. Coaches saw the way he moved, the way he elevated, not just physically, but emotionally. He carried a different kind of weight, like training was breathing. His neighborhood, just another southern setting, forgotten by the larger map. But to Michael, every inch of it mattered. The porch steps where he taped ankles, the corners where he faked defenders out of imaginary shoes, the driveway where he shattered expectations long before records. Summer days dared him to stop, but he didn't. When the pavement sizzled under sun, he trained. When winter curled its edges around the court, he still came out, dribbling, sweating, inhaling cold air through clenched teeth. And always, his father nearby. James would build things, bikes, boards, hoops. He believed in foundation, in earning. He taught Michael not just how to dream, but to respect the grind beneath it. On quiet nights, they'd sit outside. No grand speeches, just the chirp of insects and the occasional murmur of a television from a neighboring house. His dad didn't promise stardom. He encouraged effort, and effort Michael absorbed like breath. By his junior year, he made varsity, and by his senior year, he made headlines. Even then, though, before the scholarship offers, before the All-American nods, Michael remained in motion, running hills before sunrise, shooting free throws in the dimming light, not to impress anyone, but because something inside him wouldn't let him stop. He wasn't chasing destiny. He was crafting it. Every missed shot, every overturned ankle on cracked pavement, every time Larry beat him in a game, it all layered into the story. Invisible, stitching in future banners no one had imagined yet. The town may have slept, but Michael didn't. Not in the morning before practice, not in the moments when his friends called it a day, but he wanted 10 more minutes, not when the world looked the other way, because even in those early years, he understood something most never do. That greatness is not a moment. It's not one game, one dunk, one victory. It's a pattern, quiet and relentless. And somewhere in a backyard in Wilmington, under the stretching North Carolina sky, a boy kept leaping, reaching not just for the rim, but for the unreachable, higher and higher, always higher. The campus at Chapel Hill moved like molasses in the early morning. Dew clung to brick pathways, and the Carolina blue sky poured itself slowly over trees that had seen generations pass beneath them. It was here, among red oak and fire maple, that Michael Jordan became something more than potential, named by his mother, guided by his father, now shaped by Dean Smith. The University of North Carolina wasn't just a stop, it was a crucible. And Dean Smith's system? A discipline in structure, in selflessness, where egos were sacrificed for cohesion, and talent wasn't an exception to the rules, but a student of them. When Michael walked into Carmichael Arena, he was still raw. Fast, yes. Bold, yes. But not yet refined. Not yet the player the world would one day memorize. He had to be stripped back, pressed, challenged, taught how to wait for the right pass, how to disappear into a play, only to emerge at the perfect second. Coach Smith didn't just teach him plays, he taught him patience. Michael submitted, grudgingly at times, but he listened. He let himself be sculpted. He wanted more than flash. He wanted to understand. His freshman season carried its own hum, a slow rise, moments of struggle sandwiched between bursts of brilliance. But one game would tuck that entire year into memory, etched not by a stat sheet, but by a single shot. March 29th, 1982. The NCAA championship game. North Carolina versus Georgetown. A title hung in the balance. And yet, the moment itself, it was quiet. A pass. James Worthy draws attention. The ball reverses. Michael Jordan receives it, left wing, feet light, hands calm. He doesn't hesitate. The crowd around him swells, but for him, it's all stillness. He lifts, releases. The ball arcs. 3 seconds later, it finds nylon. That was it. A single flick and something shifted. Years later, he'd say it changed everything. Because in that moment, he didn't just win a game. He heard his name differently. Not just as Mike anymore, but as something larger. Spotlights followed. Sports writers circled. But Michael wasn't interested in fame. Not yet. He played on. Sophomore year. Junior. Each day under Smith's methodical gaze. Each night returning to the fundamentals. His mind absorbed formations the way his body absorbed contact. He didn't rush toward the NBA. He marinated in the rhythm of college ball. He respected the pause before the leap. Back on campus, he was still just a student. He rode a bike. He wore sweats. He joked with teammates. But on the court, something had changed. The movements were tighter, crisper. He floated differently. The court belonged to him, but he never acted entitled to it. Dean Smith once said Michael was the only player he ever coached who could turn it on and off. And he never turned it off. His junior year would be his final one in Chapel Hill. By then, he had a name. Player of the Year, Olympic gold medalist. Whispers of superstardom growing louder. But he still called home, still ran suicides in practice, without complaint, still respected the code. He declared for the NBA draft in 1984, but he left behind more than statistics. He left behind the echoes of footsteps that had raced the hall after evening classes, the lines of sweat his sneakers carved into the wooden floor of Carmichael. He walked out of college a man, a student still, yes, but also a force in waiting. What Michael learned at Chapel Hill went beyond technique. He learned how to slow the game down when it pulses in chaos, how to wait, to rise, to strike, how to exist as both fire and control. Many remember the shot. Few remember the spaces between, the missed free throws in practice, the arguments, the stillness of late campus nights, the long talks with Phil Ford, the silent moments where he learned to surrender the need to dominate every possession. And in sacrificing one version of himself, he opened the door to something greater, because greatness doesn't bloom fully in a game. It takes root when no one sees. North Carolina gave Michael more than a platform. It gave him polish. It grounded the leap he was about to make with gravity. Even as he prepared to defy it, Chicago, in the 80s, moved like a city draped in frost. The wind off Lake Michigan whispered through alleyways and into brick buildings where hope was often cordoned off to certain sides of town. The skyline stood proud, but the streets carried a kind of weariness, like even the sidewalks were tired of waiting, and into that breath of cold came a 21-year-old kid, a third overall pick from the University of North Carolina. His name still sounded sharp, unfamiliar, a name that would one day echo across continents, for now just printed across a crisp white jersey. Jordan. He entered the league in the aftermath of a summer filled with quiet upheaval. The 1984 NBA draft, perhaps the most talented in history, placed him behind two names, Hakeem Olajuwon first and Sam Bowie second. It's easy now to grimace at the picks in retrospect, but at the time, Michael Jordan was simply seen as gifted, not yet inevitable. His first steps as a Bull felt like spark against flint. Chicago hadn't seen much shine in years. The stadium seats lay half empty most nights, the team buried beneath the weight of inconsistency and small expectations. But when Michael stepped onto the court, something shifted. Fans leaned forward. The lights seemed just a bit brighter. He was lean then, all sinew and spring, but he carried his urgency like armor. Game after game he floated, hung in the air just a moment longer than gravity allowed. Layups curled backwards, somehow defying logic. Mid-air reversals turned defenders into statues. When he dribbled, he moved like a ripple, fast, fluid, untouchable. They began to say he flew, but if you looked closer, it wasn't magic. It was mechanics bound by obsession. Years of backyard gravel, of L-shaped fences posing as defenders, the footwork of a ballet dancer, the hands of someone who trusted the ball like it was an extension of blood and bone. His rookie season stunned even the skeptics. He averaged 28.2 points per game, That kind of number, for someone fresh from college, wasn't supposed to happen. Not that quickly, not that completely. But Michael didn't wait for the game to come to him. He ran headfirst into its heart. On one night, he'd glide past multiple defenders like they were props in a choreographed sequence. On another, he'd soar baseline, body horizontal, switching hands midair simply because it felt right. Yet, what defined his play wasn't just scoring. It was electricity, control, like the air shifted when he touched the ball. Off the court, the endorsements began. Quiet at first, a deal with Nike that would eventually become its own movement. And yet, Michael treated much of it like noise. His cathedral was the hardwood. The gospel was his work ethic. Teammates noticed, not just the way he played, but the way he practiced. How he attacked drills mid-practice, like they were Game 7 possessions. He didn't preserve energy for later. He burned it all, every time. The Bulls, for all their rising stardom, still stumbled. The team finished 38-44 that season, playoff bound, but far from dominant. Michael wasn't just carrying a franchise on his back. He was dragging it forward. Still, under all the thunder, he remained composed. Quiet, almost. In interviews, his voice lacked bravado. He spoke with clarity, not rhythm. But on the court, he was a sonnet composed in shockwaves. Every arena he walked into, crowds leaned in, even on away nights. Home fans began queuing earlier. Fadeaway jumpers turned into audience rituals. Opposing teams braced themselves, like facing a force they couldn't fully solve. Midway through the season, whispers started. Not just Rookie of the Year, but next face of the league. And yet, none of it seemed to lift him off the ground. That grace you saw in dunks and fast breaks, it came from weight, from silence, from knowing the edge of failure and refusing to linger near it. He played as if chased. not by defenders, but by a memory of being passed over, being doubted, being cut. And so, every point he scored wasn't just a stat, it was punctuation on a sentence he'd been writing since Wilmington. By season's end, he was Rookie of the Year, not by vote margins, by proclamation. Still, it didn't feel finished. Not to him. His eyes rarely drifted toward the crowd. Instead, they honed in on the clock, the play call, the lane ahead. There was something almost monastic about him. How he bowed his head between free throws. How he removed flash from much of his game, except where it served intention. The city of Chicago began to change, seats filled, streetwear bent toward red and black. Kids outside imitated not just his shots, but the angle of his dribble. People no longer said, when the Bulls turn things around. They said, when Michael Jordan turns it around for them. But he didn't strut through this praise. He carried it like all his other weight, quietly, powerfully, and without complaint. There's a myth that he entered the league as a king, but the truth is gentler, and perhaps more remarkable. He came in as a rookie who refused to be treated like one, not by his teammates, not by defenders, not by seeming limits. His jersey wasn't yet iconic. There were no statues waiting for him, no rings forged in gold. Just a player, in motion, torch in hand, ready to set an entire league on fire, one basket at a time. The pain came quiet at first. A sharp turn, a misstep. The questions after. In the 1985-86 season, Michael Jordan cracked a bone in his left foot, just 3 games into his sophomore campaign in the pros. And suddenly, the ascent was paused, halted by the cruel logic of bones and biology. He sat. He waited. 64 games passed. For a man who'd built his rhythm entirely on forward motion, it was almost unbearable. But in his silence, something sharpened. He didn't drift from the game. He studied it. Obsessed. Attended practices he couldn't play in. Took notes during huddles. Argued for minutes the team doctors wouldn't grant him. Let me play, he told them. The front office said no. Logic said wait. But Michael never did well with patience when it stood between him and the ball. There's a myth that greatness loves the process. It doesn't. It lives in opposition to limitation. And Michael began to lock horns with every wall in his path. Authority, pain, time itself. When he was finally cleared, just in time for the playoffs, Chicago barely clung to a postseason berth. 30 wins, 52 losses. Their reward? A matchup with the Boston Celtics, the best team in the league. No one gave the Bulls a chance. No one expected spectacle. But Michael Jordan didn't come back quietly. Game 2, the Boston Garden wasn't ready. He dropped 63 points, an explosion disguised as grace, crossovers like ghost steps, elevation like breath itself, fadeaways that drifted between fingertips and inevitability. Larry Bird, no stranger to brilliance, said afterward, "That was God disguised as Michael Jordan." The Bulls lost the series, but the world saw something stir, unmistakable, a signal flaring through the league. He wouldn't be ignored, and so the work deepened. Michael didn't just want the highlight reel, he wanted mastery. So each offseason, he carved out weaknesses and replaced them with ruthlessness. His jump shot? Refined. His physique? Hardened with weight training, resistance work, routine. No longer was he just levitating over people. Now, he was bulldozing through them. That's when help began to find him. In 1987, the Bulls drafted a long, lean forward from Central Arkansas named Scottie Pippen. He wasn't polished yet, still raw in many ways, but he was smart, crafty, determined. Together, they would shape each other. Around them, a cast was built. Horace Grant, with his goggles and grit. Later, players like Ron Harper, Tony Kukoc, Steve Kerr. But all these names were scattered puzzle pieces. To solve it, they needed structure. Phil Jackson arrived, not as a commanding voice, but as a quiet philosopher of the game. Tall, measured, intrigued more by spacing than spectacle. He brought with him a strange and beautiful blueprint, the triangle offense, created by Tex Winter, built on movement, equal opportunity, trust. It ran contrary to how Michael had been taught to dominate. It asked him to pass, to wait, to trust the system, not just the instinct. He didn't embrace it at first, but Phil was patient. He conjured something spiritual in basketball, blending Indian philosophy, Zen thought, literature, even psychology. He spoke in metaphors. He challenged egos with silence. Michael began to see how winning might require more than brilliance. It might require surrender. And so he adapted, not by shrinking, but by expanding, learning to disappear into the rhythm until the exact second he was needed. The Pistons noticed the change. The Detroit Bad Boys, Isaiah Thomas, Bill Laimbeer, Dennis Rodman, Joe Dumars, they stood as the mountain between Michael and the summit. They didn't just beat you, they battered you. Fouls were administered like policy, pain used as a weapon, and for 3 straight years, they sent the Bulls home early. Each loss left bruises, physical marks, emotional ones. In those moments, Michael didn't wallow. He lifted, trained, pushed his teammates harder. He stopped trying just to fly over obstacles and instead began to bend them, reinvent himself every summer. 1990 was the breaking point. The Bulls evolved from scorched flare-ups to a precise, unstoppable machine. Phil's triangle floated through possessions. Michael chose moments instead of chasing them. Pippen emerged, no longer just a sidekick, but a blade beside the sword. That season, the Bulls lost to the Pistons again, Game 7. But something had changed. The loss felt like the final chapter, not just another rejection, because behind the defeat was readiness. Michael stood that summer, not as a man wondering what more he needed, but as a man who already had it, all forged in injury, resistance, and disappointment. He no longer played only to prove anything. Now, he played to claim it. The breakthrough came not with thunder, but with calm. June 12th, 1991, Game 5 of the NBA Finals. The Bulls stood on the edge, up 3-1 against the Los Angeles Lakers. Magic Johnson, the grinning architect of Showtime, had one foot in sunset. And Michael Jordan, he was ready to rise. In that final moment, he dished instead of dunked. A pass to John Paxson. Shot made. Championship sealed. But the image that stayed wasn't the score or the confetti. It was Michael, midcourt, cradling the trophy, collapsing into the arms of his father. Eyes closed, hands shaking. A weight finally exhaled. He had arrived. And from that day forward, the world would never take its eyes off of him again. They called it a dynasty, yet the word feels too clinical for something that carried so many shades of beauty and burden. One by one, the years unfolded like scripture. 1992, Portland, a finals duel against Clyde Drexler, a war fought from the arc. In Game 1, Michael hit 6 3-pointers in one half, enough to make the world lean in. Then came the shrug, not arrogance, not even confidence, just mystery. Even he didn't know how it was happening. The moment had simply found him, and he let it flow through his fingertips. In Barcelona that summer, he joined the Dream Team, the greatest collection of basketball talent ever assembled. Even among gods, he soared a little higher, quiet, watchful, competitive in scrimmages, like Olympic gold hung in every pass. He wasn't just an American hero. He was becoming a global one. 1993 brought the Suns and Charles Barkley, a grueling series, radiant with intensity. Michael averaged over 40 points per game, relentless, poetic violence. But the victory parade that followed rang hollow. That same year, James Jordan, his anchor, his friend, was murdered. The loss cratered something inside him. Grief clung to every highlight. What was once joy now came layered in ash. He stepped away. Baseball drew him, not for fame, not for spectacle, but for escape. He played for the Birmingham Barons, a double-A team in the White Sox system. The country watched, puzzled, skeptical. But Michael didn't chase understanding. He chased silence. In 1995, he returned to the sport he never truly left. 2 words, a press release. "I'm back." He rejoined Chicago late in the season. Rusty, sure, but still sharp in places where most had gone dull. He wore number 45 now, different, but unmistakably him. That year they fell short. Knocked out of the playoffs by Orlando, but that, as ever, only awakened the deeper flame. Then came 1996, the season of resurgence. 72 wins, only 10 losses. A machine, precision, and fury. Jordan, renewed and bitter with purpose. Pippen, evolved. Phil Jackson guiding with soft command, and Dennis Rodman, a disciple of chaos. Crashing boards and patterns alike. The finals brought Seattle, but Chicago met them with orchestration. Every cut, every switch, part of an endless ballet. Michael didn't guzzle the spotlight. He simply stepped into it when required. They won the title on Father's Day, and afterward, he lay on the locker room floor, the trophy in one arm, sobs racking his body. The cameras watched, but they didn't comment, because some grief carries its own language. 1997 carried echoes of genius and grind. Utah, the opponent. Karl Malone, John Stockton. In Game 5 of the finals, Jordan appeared haunted, pale, staggering. Disease had soaked into him, rumored to be the flu, perhaps food poisoning. He could barely stand. And yet he scored 38 points. A ghost wearing a number 23 jersey, buoyed by something unearthly. At the final buzzer, he collapsed into Scotty's arms. No celebration, just survival. They called it the flu game, but it was more than illness. It was the human body bending to will. Then came the final symphony, 1998. No one knew it yet, but this would be the last dance. The final chapter of the Bulls dynasty. A weary roster, aging shoulders, whispers of front office fractures, contracts unresolved. Yet on the court, the poetry remained. The finals again brought Utah. Game 6. The moment arrives late, tied score, seconds ticking like heartbeats. Michael moves. First, a steal. Then, with the ball in his hands and 5.2 seconds to go, guarded by Brian Russell, he dribbles right, plants, crossover. Russell stumbles. Michael rises. The shot arcs. Nets. No timeout. No celebration. Just silence. The last shot of his career as a Bull. He walked away again, this time with 6 rings. The second three-peat had been secured not with dominance, but with nuance. They didn't just win, they endured. Scotty, ever the second verse to Jordan's chorus. Rodman, unpredictable and vital. Kerr and Kukoc, the glue. Phil, stirring a tempest beneath calm. But the rhythm came from Michael. In the quiet, in the shadows between plays, in the long exhale between jumpers. 6 championships, each one earned not just through brilliance, but through bruises, battles, sweat that spoke louder than sound. Those moments live still, not because of the banners, but because of the weight they carried. The weight only greatness can bear quietly until it becomes legend. The curtain never falls all at once. Sometimes it drifts downward like dust in empty arenas, quiet, reluctant, unsure if the moment is truly done. That's how it went for Michael Jordan. There was no grand gasp, no final drumbeat, just a sense of completion felt more than declared. In 1999, after 6 championships, 14 All-Star selections, and more memories than film can contain, Michael stepped away from the game. Again. This time, it felt permanent, not dramatic, just final. The Bulls had been dismantled. Phil Jackson let go. Scottie Pippen traded. Dennis Rodman gone. The keys to the dynasty scattered. What remained was silence. A city exhaling. His locker sat still, undisturbed, like a shrine. The number 23 hung like memory. And in that stillness, people tried to move on. Basketball turned to new stars. Kobe, Allen Iverson. A younger generation stepped forward, eager and loud. But some names echo differently. Even apart from the league, Michael's shadow lingered, a silhouette on banners, a signature frozen in sneaker soles, a standard no one could shake. Time passed. And then, something unexpected. A whisper, first, an idea too ridiculous to take seriously. But like so many moments before, Michael let silence do the talking. In 2001, at age 38, he returned. Not in red and black, not as a bull, but in wizard's blue. He came not as myth reborn, but as man extended. Older, weathered, but still driven. Washington was not a contender. The team was brittle, unfocused. But just like Chicago years before, when few believed change was possible, Michael stepped into the gym like a metronome. He didn't speak of championships. He spoke of competing. No fanfare accompanied his first steps this time. But those who watched saw something subtle, maybe even sublime. He still averaged over 20 points per game, still defended, still nailed last-second shots. But this Michael didn't float. He gritted. The lift was gone, but not the weight. Crowds filled arenas across the country, not just to cheer, but to thank him. Every game was a pilgrimage. They wanted one more memory, one more fadeaway, one more glimpse of that controlled fire, even if dimmed by years. There was no dynasty here, and he knew that. What he sought wasn't another ring. He sought closure. His final season was wrapped in nostalgia. Players who had idolized him growing up now guarded him on defense. Rookies asked for autographs off camera. Coaches shook their heads, not at the stats, but at the dignity of it all. April 16th, 2003, Philadelphia. That was the last time. With just over 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, head coach Doug Collins subbed him out. Michael rose, jogged to the bench, but something hung in the air. The crowd chanted his name. Opposing players stood in applause, and quietly, beautifully, the ball found its way back to the scorer's table. Collins called time. Michael checked in. One last time. The foul was intentional, just a mechanism, a ritual, a curtain call wrapped inside the rules. He went to the line, hit both free throws, and on the walk back, the world stood up, not for a final basket, but for everything that had come before it. He waved, then sat, and with it, history took its breath. Since then, Michael has remained. Visible? Yes. Owner of the Charlotte Hornets. Billionaire. Icon. But somehow still just beyond reach. He appears on rare occasions. Hall of Fame inductions. special ceremonies. Each time the emotion is closer to reverence than reaction. But even as accolades continue to find him, there's something distant in his eyes. He chased perfection louder than anyone, and when the sound faded, he listened harder than most. In quiet moments now, you can picture him, not on stage, but alone, in a private gym, somewhere with no cameras, still crafting jump shots in silence, still inching, always, toward an unreachable version of himself. Because for him, the game was never entirely about glory. It was about grace. Time eventually takes the flight from every great player. But with Michael, it never took the landing. He left the court one last time, not diminished, but complete. Not a man running out of time, but a man who'd simply used every second. There is a room somewhere, unlit, save for a single bulb swaying slightly above a wooden floor. You can hear it again. That sound. The ball. Low, steady. One hand, then the other. Michael Jordan is no longer on the court, but echoes still chase him. They cling to everything he's touched. The sound of a jump shot settling in net. The silence before it leaves the hand. The hush of millions watching before breath becomes roar. He hasn't worn a jersey in years. Not that kind. Not in that way. But his influence is a shadow that never stopped moving. Walk any street and look down. You'll see him on the pavement beneath you. Not his figure, but his shape. In shoes, on logos, in art. Air Jordan, the brand, was born from Air Jordan. The belief that the human body could stretch beyond what was predicted. In 1984, Nike offered him a deal. Few expected much of it. Just another rookie with a bit of style. Today, those sneakers are woven into global culture, stocked on shelves, sold in seconds, collected, worshipped, not because of the leather and rubber, but because of the story they told. He changed not just the game. He changed how we wear the game, how we speak about it. His number, now retired in more than one franchise, echoes in every child pulling up for a fadeaway, with 5 seconds left on the clock of a driveway game that no one else is watching. Number 23 isn't just digits now. It's memory, it's pressure, it's legacy sewn into mesh. And still, somehow, it feels incomplete to measure him in shoes or champagne or statues. Because what lasted, what truly refuses to fade, is the feeling. To watch him play wasn't just to witness, it was to believe. The documentaries try. The Last Dance reopened the vault, gave us glimpses behind the teeth of his focus. The moments when even teammates couldn't touch him, when his joy turned to obsession, when obsession became sacrifice. But what they couldn't capture, what no reel could ever stitch together, was the isolation of greatness. The space he stood in, often alone, as the air thickened around every decision he made. He didn't just win, he demanded something brutal of winning. And in doing it, he brought us with him into the air, into moments that felt impossible until they weren't. Think of the things now automatic in sport. The game-winning shot as spectacle, the signature sneaker, the branding of athletes as empires. He was the archetype, not always smiling, not always gentle, but utterly, irresistibly real. His competitiveness is now myth, but to him, it was never mythological. It was the simplest thing. Do not lose. In cards, in dice, in practice, in life. And in that pursuit, he gave us more than banners or trophies. He gave us a language, a shot worth risking everything, a stare that stopped a defender cold, a hand raised after a foul made with meaning, all built into the script of the game itself. He made basketball into something operatic. Each movement had weight, Each gesture had ghost, and long after we stopped watching him play, he played on, in arc, in memory, in the flick of a wrist on a neighborhood court where no one is watching but the stars. He didn't just teach us how to win, he taught us what it might cost, and still, he paid it gladly. So, when we speak of greatness, we often whisper, like we're in the presence of something holy, and maybe we are, because some legacies don't yell. They hover, they watch, they wait. Michael's isn't painted in neon. It's carved into wood floors, into silence, into the pause before a shot goes up. And when the world is worn down by noise, that's where the truth remains. In those quiet echoes, in that familiar sound. A ball, alone in a gym, bouncing, again and again.